Hey guys, Hawkwood here. So let's talk about White Force Fiendsmith Post-Banlist. This deck list is a work in progress, but I just have something put together really quick because every time I make one of these videos, everyone always asks deck list, deck list, deck list. It's testing for a reason. You know, I don't have everything really thought out or tested with, but here's just like a basic concept idea. So the big takeaway to note here is that we have all the Fiendsmith cards maxed out pretty much. The Lurrie and Tract are back. It's because any Fiendsmith card is now full White Force combo. It's bananas. And the way you do that is with this card, Fiendsmith Rex Tremende, and Sprite Sprint. Sprite Sprint being able to dump a level 2. A Stellar of the White Forest is a level 2 monster, and that is how you bridge your White Forest into your Fiendsmith into your White Forest. Now you might be asking, how do we bridge White Forest into Fiendsmith? Well, you know, Moon of the Closed Sky is banned, but we have Fabled Levid Lazabel, which is a level 10 synchro monster that's generic, 1 tuner plus 1 or more non-tuner monsters. Of course, it's a light fiend. Its effect is irrelevant, you'll pretty much never use this. However, it's a level 10 synchro light fiend that we can use by making any level 10 synchro monster that we normally are able to do. So the easiest way to do that is with the Azamina Mu Arceolago, which is a level 6 monster, and a Silvy of the White Forest is level 4, tuner plus non-tuner. Just kind of similar to how we would make Chaos Angel with Light and Dark, now we can just make this instead. Obviously, with these changes, the extra deck is really tight again, even tighter than before, because obviously we need to fit room for the Lacrima, the High Wave King Caesar, and also the Rex Tremenda and the Sprint, if we're planning to use the Fiendsmith engine as a bridge. If you're not playing the Fiendsmith engine as bridge, but just as an extra secondary interrupt, then you totally don't need to run the Rex Tremenda plus Sprint, or the Abalaku or the Celine, so you have a lot more flexibilities, but all these cards I'm playing for a reason. So in that regard, I have to cut out some cards in the extra deck, and you know, it's pretty sad to cut out Popular and Vengeance Dragon. However, these are always been sort of more optional cards, just because you're summoning them off of Diabellstar Vengeance or Diabell Queen, and you can always summon these two cards instead. Silvera is not once per turn, so you can summon it once to Book of Eclipse everything, and then summon it a second time by bouncing it back to the extra deck and summoning it again. Or you can summon Arceola Sinister Soul, which can send a spell or trap card to add a light spellcaster, so we're running the one Veiler just as a search target for an additional interruption, just to play around the board breakers a little bit, because they seem to be a bit more popular in the format. One thing to note is the fusion spell is super weak in this deck because we're not actually running any good fusion targets for it. It's still nice as an additional name, however, this is something to note. And if we start with field spell, we can still use this to synchro into any of our Azamina fusions like Ilia Sylvia on our opponent's turn, because it's a dark monster, we won't be able to summon on our turn. But yeah, this is just like a preliminary deck idea. I mostly wanted to go over the combos, so let's get into that and we can talk more about deck choices. And you'll see why I'm running all these specific cards, just because it's really awkward with the extra deck space. I don't know if this is correct, maybe it's not even correct to run a lot of these cards, but this is just the cards you need if you want to run all the engines together. So maybe pure White Forest is just better because, you know, you don't have this issue, but you know, these are some of the things you lose when you are trying to fit the Fiendsmith engine, which is, you know, a very powerful sub-engine. So let's look at this first combo. Pardon my end board there. But this is just a showcase of what happens if we draw Lurrie and any spell or trap cards. So this is, of course, the worst card in the Fiendsmith engine to have in your opening hand, but even this card, normal summoned, is full Fiendsmith combo. And the way we do that is, so we're going to normal summon Lurrie, make Requiem effect, summon main deck Lacrima, dump Engraver, shuffle back the Lurrie, summon it to the field, and now we can make a sequence effect, shuffling back the Lacrima and the Requiem to make the Fusion Lacrima, which will then be able to add the Fiendsmith Engraver to our hand. We're going to discard the Engraver to add Tract to our hand. We're going to activate Tract, add Lurrie, discard Lurrie. You know, very typical Fiendsmith stuff before the original Lacrima ban. So as you can see, we get to this position with Fiendsmith Sequence, Fiendsmith Lacrima on the field, and an extra monster here. So if we started with Engraver or Tract, either of these cards, then instead of adding the engraver back to our hand, we would just summon the engraver to the field, basically threatening a whatchamacallit, a high wave King Caesar. But in this case, you know, we're going here anyway because we're using it to bridge. So it doesn't matter what this monster is, it can be any monster, because we're going to link it away anyway into Sprite Sprint. So Sprite Sprint just requires a level, rank, or link to monster as material. So that is the sequence in this equation here. And Sprint's going to dump a Stellar. We're going to use the Tracked effect in the graveyard. It has a graveyard effect for those of you who forgot. You can banish it to fusion summon a Fiendsmith fusion monster. This is something we didn't really use. This is something that we haven't been using for a while, just because Fiendsmith Lacrima is banned. But now that it's back in the format, it's something to pay attention to. So it's not, you know, if you're playing a deck with effects that can Book of Moon stuff, just be careful because Track can fuse face down cards. So we're going to fuse away these two monsters on our field to make the Rex Tremende. So the Rex Tremende just requires a Fiendsmith fusion monster and then one fusion or link monster. So that would be the Sprint and the Lacrima here. Sprint can't be used as link material, but we can still use it as fusion material, which is super nice. And then we're going to use its effect, which is, if this card is fusion summoned, you can discard one card to send a Light Fiend from deck or extra deck to the graveyard. So that's why it specifically needs to be a Speller Trap in our hand. That's extra. And we're going to dump the Requiem that we sent to the we put back into our deck, because we just want the link monsters to use as equips, because they'll be equip spells and we can use that as extra fodder. And of course, because we sent a spell to the graveyard for monster effect, a Stellar will trigger to summon itself back from the graveyard, and then we can use both of the link effects to equip. And now we have materials for this Stellar to get Silvy. Silvy will get Tails. We'll synchro these into Arciella. Arciella effect, dumping Tails to get the field spell. New chain, a Stellar 1, Tails 2 to reset itself. We gotta make sure we play around Growth Spell as best we can, even though they would probably use Bell already on the Fiendsmith stuff. We'll use Tails to get LZ, summon the LZ with her effects, and then make Diabelle Queen here. And we're gonna add back any Speller Trap just to chain block the LZ Azumina. The Tails is nice for follow-up, but you can also add back your other spell card that you discarded earlier in the turn if you wanted to. So we'll get the Deception here. We'll use the Deception tributing the Stellar, which is sort of an extra body here. And then we're going to go Hollowed, make Mu Arcielago. We want to make it into the extra monster zone. You'll see why in a second. Mu Arcielago, get wanted. Add back Hollowed. This is standard affair in White Forest Azumina, you know. Hollowed 1, wanted 2, search the Black Witch, summon out Ilia Sylvia or Omni Negate. So before this summon, this is where we would get nibbed. And if we got nibbed here, you can see that we still have Ilia Sylvia summon, Omni Negate. We have Diabelle, so the Black Witch we haven't used yet. We have Field Spell and Field Spell to get basically all of our monsters back online. And we haven't used the Sylvia effect in graveyard, so we can still make a link to or another synchro monster if we get enough bodies for it. And if we get nibbed here, remember this Rex Tremende is unaffected by card effects except with Fiendsmith cards while equipped with an equip spell. So that's why it's nice that we kept this card equipped up until this point. So even if we get nibbed, we still have this body on field for extra fodder. And that, you know, I haven't really thought about the nib lines yet, but this is just something to consider. You know, this is our last point where we would get nibbed without a way to negate it. Obviously, we still lose to multiple hand traps, but every deck lives to nib plus imperm, you know? It's just classic affair. But now that we no longer are worried about nib, we can send away this equip spell as extra material to summon this Diabelle Star. Diabelle Star will set the trap card. Like I said earlier in the deck overview, we don't really need the quick play spell because we don't really run any targets because our extra deck is so tight. But here, now we can use the Sylvia effect to summon itself back from the graveyard. And you can see why we wanted to summon the Mu Arcielago into the extra monster zone. We're so clogged on board space here. And we can send away all 4 of these monsters now to make about a Q, the Lightless Shadow. So it requires 2+ monsters, including a Fiend. This is a tech option that we've always used in White Forest, but now we're sort of bringing it back a little bit, just because it's a really nice option in this new version of Fiendsmith. So from here, we're going to continue playing. We can now use the field spell because this is the last dark monster that we needed to summon. We'll search LZ. LZ, get rid of the trap card here. We want to keep the field spell on the field just because it has a secret effect here where you can target one white forest monster you control. It is treated as a tuner this turn. So that will come up shortly. We're going to keep doing our normal stuff, get Diabels. Now we can get rid of the field spell after we trigger the effects. So we're going to use the effects to make this a tuner. I'm just indicating it with a marker here. But now we can send it away. It's for the turn. It's a lingering effect. As you can see here, it is treated as a tuner this turn. So this field spell doesn't need to be on the field once we use the effect. And we're going to do our standard White Forest, White Witch, Black Witch stuff. Make this an attack just because I already committed to attack position here. And here, after we add the Vengeance to our hand, as you know, Vengeance can summon from hand or graveyard, so we can actually use it as discard fodder, and it's pretty free. So it's pretty free value here. And we're going to banish it, summon back our Esteller, which we had earlier in the turn, and now a level 2 tuner plus a level 2 non-tuner. It can make our Herald of the Arclight, which is limited to 1, but now we have 2 Omni Negates. That's pretty crazy, no? And then, of course, we're going to summon back the Vengeance, pump everything to 500 points to 3,000. And then end phase, we'll get the About Q back, we'll get the Deception back as well. So this is sort of our end board. As you can see, it's super powerful. It's even more powerful than it was before, now that we have access to Lacrima, the Fusion Lacrima. And this was with normal summon Lurrie, which is, you know, normally one of the worst cards you could start with, but you can see how crazy the Fiendsmith stuff now is in this deck. Just being able to bridge from Fiendsmith to White Forest is just so powerful. So that's like example number 1, and the next question, of course, is how do we bridge from White Forest to Fiendsmith? I mean, you don't have to. You can just play, if you don't open Fiendsmith cards, you can just play with your normal White Forest stuff, and it's totally fine as well. But, you know, and just in case you want to do the White Fiendsmith stuff, you know, we can definitely do that still. So we're going to start off with a standard Silvy plus 1 spell combo. This is like the bread and butter of this deck, so this is just like standard stuff. This combo is almost identical to a previous combo before the ban list. So the reason why we search for LZ right away with the tails is in order to make Ilia Sylvia as our 5th summon. So we're going to tribute away the Synchro here, use Hollowed, get Mu Arcielago, get Wanted, you know, very standard stuff, nothing too special. Add back the Hollowed here, Hollowed 1, Wanted 2, search Black Witch, make Ilia Sylvia, and here is where things diverge. Normally here you would, normally in the combo here you would just activate the field spell because there's no more dark monsters we're going to summon, and you would send it away for Black Witch, and then you can make Moon of the Closed Heaven with Black Witch plus this Mu Arcielago. But obviously since Moon is banned, we have to get there a different way, and we can do that by summoning back the Silvy, and Silvy plus Mu Arcielago makes a level 10 Synchro, which is the fabled Synchro here. It's generic level 10, but it's a light fiend, and that's all that matters. So pretty much nothing really changed with this combo line to get into the Fiendsmith stuff, except for the fact that we used our Silvy of the White Forest, which is a tuner monster. So previously in my Fiendsmith White Forest combos, we would summon back the Silvy later in the turn and synchro the Lacrima and the Silvy to make Diabel Queen using 2 level 4s. But obviously we can't do that anymore with needing to make the level 10 because we've burned the effect of Silvy, so that effect isn't live. But we can still get there, just slightly different. Obviously we're setting the trap again because we don't have good fusions. We're gonna bring back the Engraver. We summoned the Black Witch first here just because we're about to shuffle this Requiem back, so we might as well make use of it as a free send for the Diabel Star. So specifically we're gonna shuffle back the Engraver here, which seems a little counterintuitive because we lose access to Engraver for follow-up turns. But we'll summon the Lacrima here, and Lacrima's gonna get Lacrima Crimson Tears back to the field because it can summon anything, any Light Fiend back. It doesn't have to be Engraver, even though that's the most common choice. And this is, you know, a level 4 non-tuner monster, which we'll be using later. But we'll get rid of all these cards for a Bawaq. So you can see we use Bawaq in multiple different combos to bring back different sort of pieces. So we're using it here to have an additional way to bring back, for example, a Silvy. So we'll activate the field spell, get LZ effects. We can get rid of the trap card here. And then we're going to make this a tuner. Oh, I guess not making it... We're not bringing back the Silvy right away because we also have this LZ. So we're actually going to do a little bit of slightly different combo. Bring back the Arceala Sinister Soul. And we're going to now get rid of the field spell. And we're going to keep going. This is sort of similar to the previous combo where we're going to use the extra Diabellstar Vengeance as a discard for the Bawaq. And this will bring back the LZ. And now we can make the level 8. Now we'll put in... you don't have to put in the EMZ. I just do it just in case for extra space. We'll add back the Tails for follow-up. We actually did not use the discard effect this turn. So that's just something to be aware of. If you do get this back, you can also discard it as additional cost. And then during the end phase, we'll get all our stuff back. Yeah, change it to attack mode, just because I like doing the 3000 everything. Because it's harder to attack over, and then we'll get all of our cards back at the end phase as well. Obviously, with the Deception, you can also use Wanted to shuffle it back in if you want to get an additional draw. But yeah, so you can see it's a pretty similar end board. Obviously, the only thing we didn't get is the Arclight we had in the previous combo, so... Starting with Fiendsmith is sometimes even more powerful. But yeah, you can also, obviously with the Fiendsmith stuff, you don't have to go into the Bawaq and stuff like that. You could just go into a High Wave King Caesar, which may be a better play. I'm not actually sure. I'm not really sure what we're trying to aim for the end board. I just like the Bawaq because it is a way to get Diabell Queen, and I think Diabell Queen on the field is so strong. Just to have like 2 different ways to summon synchro monsters from our extra deck, but yeah, that's just something to consider. And of course, we could now also bounce back the Arceala to our extra deck to search Valor if we want to search Valor. Okay, and now let's look into this combo. This is a slightly different combo. This is if you start with Field Spell and any spell or trap card. So we're going to go with a Stellar into Silvy, Silvy search Tails, synchro these away into Arceala, Arceala ditch to get LZ. We'll get Chainlink 1, a Stellar, Chainlink 2 Tails, and then Tails to search the LZ. We'll summon the LZ and then make our Diabell Queen. LZ as a mana 1, Queen 2. We're going to add back the trap here. So if you discarded a spell, you could also add back Tails for follow-up if you want, but because we have a trap card, we need to keep this spell in the graveyard for Celine later in the combo. And we're going to search Wanted, of course, because we're Dark Locked, so we don't need Deception. So obviously with the effect, we can make this card a tuner and then make a level 10 synchro this way, so it's a little bit different. So this is one way to bridge into the Fiendsmith stuff as well. Different way to get into the Fiendsmith stuff. So as you can see here, at this point of the Fiendsmith combo, right here, when we bring back the... That's right, so this is the last chance for our opponent to nib us. And if our opponent nibs us, then we still have the LZ to get into the White Witch, and we have Wanted to get into Black Witch, and we still haven't used the Silvy effect to bounce back and summon. So we can get 1 additional summon as well of an extra body in case we need it. And obviously I haven't thought of all the nib lines, but we can look into that down the line. So otherwise we're going to be able to just summon our DD Wave 5 King Caesar. And then we're going to keep going, keep playing. Here we're going to make the Celine by summoning back the Silvy. We want to bounce back the Diabell Queen because we're going to resummon it basically. So we have exactly 3 counters with the field spell on the field, the Wanted and Graveyard and the Tails. This is why it's important to add back the trap card if you started with the trap card. And we're going to use it to bring back the Arceala. And we can now summon the LZ, and now we can synchro here into the Diabell Queen. that we put back into our extra deck. So that's how we can get both the Fiendsmith engine online with the Wave Hiking Caesar, and as well as the Diabolic Queen in rotation. And we can send away this lead now as fodder because we don't need it anymore. If you do somehow manage to get 6 spell counters on this card at this point, then it's worth keeping the Sleet on the field because it could summon back Arceala, and Arceala can then add Valor on your opponent's turn, so it can be an extra interrupt in that way. I mean, it can also summon back like Diabell from the graveyard to body block if you need to. And I'm setting the quick play spell in this board state scenario just because we're dark locked, so we don't have Ilya Sylvia, so we can summon Ilya Sylvia on our opponent's turn, which is pretty good. But otherwise, this is like pretty much the end of this combo. So it ends on basically Wave Hiking Caesar plus all the Diabell monsters, which is not like crazy because we're not accessing any of our dark cards like a Bawakyu or Fiendsmith Desiree or stuff like that. But Wave Hiking Caesar is obviously a very powerful card. You know, not sure if the quick play fusion is the right way to go, but otherwise, you know, we have now access to our Fiendsmith stuff, so whenever this Wave Hiking Caesar dies, we'll also have Fiendsmith as follow-up in addition to all these other cards for follow-up as well. So it's pretty powerful. And of course, if you guys didn't know, if you want to be a little bit safer and not need to play through Nib, just like completely check Nib, there's also the sort of like less balls to the wall combo where you just make Arclight as your 5th summon. And for those of you who don't know this combo, it's a pure White Forest combo. So very similar to the last combo, you need Field Spell plus any spell or trap card. So we just use the Field Spell to make a Stellar a tuner monster before we send it away for the LZ. And then we can get basically all 4 of these little bodies in the field, and here we can synchro the Stellar and the LZ Azamina into Herald of the Arclight as our 5th summon. And then we'll get the effect to get Wanted. Obviously we're dark locked once again, so that's why we're using Wanted. And if you don't have an additional spell and trap card, you can pitch the Wanted here for the Arceala effects, because we are just going to add it back once we make this Diabolic Queen. We're just going to add the Wanted back anyway, so we basically get to the same position. And if we don't have another good card to discard, we can also summon back this Silvy to then send it away for this Diabell Star. So we have options. And of course, like, you know, much like all these other combos, if you have other cards you can summon, like if you have the Fiendsmith cards, then you could play around with some fun stuff too. Like starting with the Fiendsmith stuff is a little bit more powerful because you have access to everything. But then, you know, this is a very good second option as well. It's always nice to just summon Caesar to like check if they have any, you know, Nibiru or anything like that. And that way you can use your other Omni Negates on their other interactions. But yeah, it's pretty much the same end board as like this combo, except instead of the DD Wave Hiking Caesar, you have the Arclight. But the trade-off, of course, is that you also don't have the Fiendsmith cards in rotation. Arclight is, of course, a more powerful card because it's a pseudo Floodgate, plus it's an Omni Negate. So I would say it depends on the matchup. You know, whatever matchup, you know, you think is better long term. Like, do you want the Caesar for the follow-up, or do you want the Arclight for the pseudo Floodgate effects? You know, so there's options. There's options. So, you know, play around with it as you will. Let's just take a look at the deck list one last time. Here's the deck list. So I haven't really played around with a side deck or anything like that. Obviously you can side deck stuff, but you can see how I use pretty much every card in the extra deck. So it's very tight on like what we can even play, and I used everything. I do really think if we are playing the Fiendsmith stuff, having the bridge, the sprint, and the Rextrament is just so strong. Just very much so boosting the consistency of this deck like tenfold. So it's a very powerful engine to have. And worst case scenario, if you do, you know, have your White Forest stuff, then you just, you know, summon Lacrima and make Wave Hiking Caesar instead, and then start playing with your White Forest stuff. And if the White Forest stuff gets hand trapped, you still have, you know, the Wave Hiking Caesar as a form of interaction. Obviously, because extra deck space is so tight, we're not running the Desiree, and we're also, you know, not running these synchro monsters, but yeah, play around with what you think, you know, check and see like what you think is good. You know, maybe you don't want the Celine because you don't need that line, or you want to play with just the White Forest stuff when you don't need all this stuff. Maybe you want Desiree still because Desiree is more powerful into board breakers and board breakers seem popular. So yeah, there's a lot of options, but those are just a few combos that I wanted to share with you for this upcoming ban list format with Lacrima unbanned. So until then, I'll see you in the next one.